Did I ever tell you what the definition of insanity is? Insanity is doing the exact same thing over and over again, expecting to change. That is crazy. And then I started seeing it everywhere I looked. Everywhere I looked, all these everywhere I looked, doing the exact thing over and over and over and over and over again, thinking this time is going to be different. No, please. This time is going to be different. I'm sorry. I don't like the way you are looking at it. Okay?
I've been having these weird thoughts lately. Like, is any of this for real or not?
It's okay. It's like water under the bridge. Did I ever tell you the definition of insanity?
So if I haven't made it painstakingly clear at this point, I'm a bit of a glutton for gaming punishment. Whether it's in the form of a super boss or a brutal difficulty option, I've always enjoyed that feeling of satisfaction that comes with doing something you previously thought you couldn't. Now, this isn't to say I like all my games that way, nor do I think every game needs to be difficult, but over the years I've found myself being increasingly drawn to the many challenge runs gaming has to offer. Sometimes, it's a simple matter of implementing some sort of handicap on your playthrough. Other times, the devs are kind enough to leave a little something extra for us to try. Super bosses are nothing new, and neither are tough challenges. In fact, video games have been cranking up the difficulty to unprecedented heights since the 80s, back when they wanted to vacuum your pockets clean of all your hard-earned quarters.
Game over. Please deposit 40 quarters.
What a rip!
But what happens when these two aspects of gaming intersect? What happens when you take an already challenging super boss and combine it with an even harder difficulty option? Simply put, what is it like to beat Kingdom Hearts 3 ReMind at level 1? I'll keep the rules for this one short and sweet. Finish ReMind on critical while remaining at level 1. Like last time, I won't be using any Koopa coins, and due to this being the same save file I used for my last level 1 run, no strength or magic boosts have been used. Second Chance and Withstand combo are yet again not being used, and I also won't be using any Grand Magic or links for neither the Data Fights or Yozora, although regular magic will be just fine. Now, Kingdom Hearts 3 ReMind is essentially split into 3 parts: ReMind, Limit Cut, and the Secret Episode, although the Secret Episode is just one fight and a bunch of cutscenes, so it's really more like 2.5 parts. This video is mostly going to focus on the Limit Cut portion of the DLC, which I think most would argue is the real meat of what's on offer. So for the sake of brevity, let's get the ReMind section out of the way. The DLC kicks off with some chatting between org members, which, in true Kingdom Hearts fashion, raises more questions than it answers, despite this being the final conclusion of the Xehanort saga. No, seriously, we totally mean it this time.
The question is, who are you, Luxord?
Huh, I always thought it was pronounced Luxord, but whatever. Something tells me mispronouncing names is going to be very low on the list of my problems later on down the line. We are then baited into thinking we're going to learn the identity of the Master of Masters, but nope, more carrot on a stick bullshit. And can I just add that this makes no sense whatsoever? Young Xehanort clearly heard him. I mean, he's right there.
Dude, I'm right here.
Regardless, Sora travels to the final world, learns in order to recover Kari's heart, he needs to dive through the hearts of the Guardians of Light, and with that knowledge we can finally get this run started. And the first boss is Dark Inferno, the only super boss that was included in the base game. In fact, no, this is a neutered version of Dark Inferno because it doesn't include his final phase. Not exactly coming into this DLC swinging. His pattern is incredibly simple, and the warning you get for hitting his revenge value is so in your face it runs the risk of giving you pink eye. Even with the potential to one-shot you, this guy really doesn't put up much of a fight, and I mostly want to focus on the new content, so let's just move past this guy. Following Dark Inferno, you fight both Annie Aqua and Terranaut again. Annie Aqua, while being one of my favourite fights from the base game, is exactly the same this time around. She even has the same piddling amount of health as in the base game. Such wasted potential. And while Terranaut here is better than he was in his gank fight with Vanitas, it is still just a simplified version of his data fight at the end of the day. Dodge, duck, dip, dive, dodging my way to victory, Terranaut here goes down without much hassle. Whatever brief hassles I went through are swiftly sandblasted, clean off and replaced with utter mundane as I now have to redo all the old gang fights, once again being more or less the same goddamn fights as the ones in the base game. Sure, you can fight as the Guardians now, which I know a lot of people have been waiting for, but at the end of the day, these fights are still the same mechanically. The Orc fights were also prone to some of the most fucking nonsensical lock-on problems one can imagine, although this was thankfully patched. But hey, you don't have to run that dumb maze gauntlet to one of the arenas anymore, so I guess you can say this is basically new content. After battling through more reskinned dicks than a survivor at a Buffalo Bob holiday house, I arrive in Scala, in all its fully explorable glory this time around. However, before I can so much as stop to think of a better segue, I am met with a mob fight that is nothing short of complete and utter fucking anarchy. Countless nobodies are spawned in while you attempt to kill the one heartless that actually progresses the game along. Simple enough in theory if it wasn't for these sorcerers that are about as fun to deal with as a golf ball sized kidney stone. They can suck a fart out of my ass with a soily straw whenever they appear in KH2, and keeping with tradition, they suck here as well. Also keeping with tradition of this DLC, my reward for making it through all these mob fights is yet another reskin. Come on Square Enix, there's a fine line between fan service and just phoning it in, and the amount of times Darksider has been reused doesn't teeter that line so much as it rails it up with a credit card and snorts it. Whatever, Darksider goes down and now it's... Oh, piss in my boots and call me Paulie. What is this baby bag bullshit I see before my eyes? Another reskin. The only thing that could make this worse is if I didn't have any food buffs active.
Fuck me, right?
Returning with a belly full of buffs and some Aurora spam, the Naught clones are evaporated from existence. Hopefully for the last time. Who am I kidding? You still keep fighting these cunts. Following this is a fight where you play as all the Guardians, and it's honestly pretty sweet. It's a gimmick fight so nothing changes regardless of your level, but this is definitely one of ReMind's highlights. The combined efforts of everyone can only hold out for so long though, and the Naught clones eventually send all the Guardians of Light cascading into various keyholes. Mickey, however, is saved by Riku, fends off the clones for the final time just as Sora shows up to give him one last helping hand. We connect a bunch of keyholes, reunite with Kairi once more, and prepare to face off against Armored Xehanort one last time. Honestly, I don't even really know what to say about this fight. It's Goatnort, only slightly different, and you can play as Kairi now. Okay, maybe that's not giving it enough credit. This fight is better than the base game version. You no longer run the risk of any camera issues because of the new arena, which is nice. In fact, this is the only arena you fight him in. His DM is pretty ridiculous though, with how he starts raining down meteors for what seems like for fucking ever. Good god, this shit was annoying. Thankfully I skipped this DM, and let me just say, this won't be the only DM I'll be skipping either. Kairi is also insanely good in this fight. She can close distances quickly, her shot lock is great, her 7 Wishes attack is essentially Sonic Blade, and her team attack with Sora just slaughters Xehanort. But yeah, without much effort, and the help of a cheeky DM skip, Goatnort is no more, the Guardians of Light are released, Sora and Kairi fuck off to the final world, and then we more or less see the ending of the base game, drawing the ReMind section to a close. I know I skimmed over a lot of stuff here, but I really can't emphasize enough just how much of a backseat this all takes to the post-game content. This is personified by the fact that for no other reason than to stop fans bitching, the Final Fantasy characters from Radiant Garden arrive for all of like 40 fucking seconds before being unceremoniously shoved to the side.
Oh my god. That's the whole thing.
No doubt, because the focus of this DLC is, in all honesty, the data battles against Organization 13 and the fight against Yozora. So let's not delay this any longer. It's time to take on this game's 13 data battles. May God have mercy on us all. Okay, so I wasn't quite sure what order to go through these guys in for this video, so to make things easier, I'm just going to go around the room in the order they appear, starting with young Xehanort. So going into this, I was all like, hey, I don't remember young Xehanort being too big of an issue, this guy should be a breeze. Not since Cyberpunk's "it'll be ready when it's ready" comment has a statement aged so fucking poorly. I was getting caught by his fake outs, peppered with his projectiles, and I quickly had to come to terms with the fact that this run, even at its easiest moments, was going to be brutal. What you will soon realise, however, is that this fight, and many fights to come for that matter, are incredibly scripted. For example, he will always start with the same fake out into a series of slashes that can be wrist dodged, he will always follow up that with a couple more slashes, follow up that with ice projectiles. He always has this mini DM that he throws out at the same point that can be ended with literally one counter slash, like, what is this shit? He'll always chuck out a final DM whenever he reaches 0 HP. I think you get the gist. Now, as handy as all this is, don't get it twisted, this guy can still give you trouble. Some attacks fake out, some attacks can come from behind you, meaning you need to have your back against the wall in order to avoid them, but punishing any of the data fights against a wall can have them breaking out or just plain fucking with the camera in general, so have fun with that. Overall, this guy isn't that bad, especially considering some of the others, but definitely let the spike in difficulty be a sign of things to come. Next up is Dark Riku, and this one was interesting. On my first playthrough I hit a huge wall when facing this guy, but somehow he was one of the few that took barely any time for me at level 1. Now just because it didn't take long doesn't mean it didn't come with some headaches. For starters, this guy is one of the few data fights that can actually punish you for hitting his revenge value. Others will usually just teleport away and start the next attack, but Riku actually retaliates if you hit his RV. Secondly, some of his openings are just really obtuse. Like for example, if you were to see a boss throw out a shield, your mind usually defaults to leaving them alone, but nope, not old mate here. Instead, hitting his shield and baiting out a parry is what creates the opening, and I mean, that's fine and all, but you also have to kind of spam the attack in order to not get locked into the parry animation. At least when he throws out his mines, the layout of them telegraphs his attacks, but things definitely start getting hectic in phase 2 when he starts throwing his weapon around. The only real thing that gave me trouble here was the dark trap that he throws down, but once the community discovered that water spells get rid of this shit, it became nothing more than an extremely flashy opening. This was definitely one of the more enjoyable fights of the run for sure. Next stop on the data battle pain train is Sayax, and I really don't have a lot of good things to say about this. So this fight retains his berserk mechanic, which I already don't like, and some of his attacks are just downright infuriating, and he has probably one of the scariest DMs of the lot. He has one attack that homes in on you, and I swear to god these things can just 180 in a matter of frames and kill you unless you aerial sweep him into the air and dash away. Then there are times because of the aforementioned berserk meter constantly filling up, he can just prematurely cut your combo short regardless of whether or not you've actually hit his RV. What a load of absolute shit! The tips you get upon dying do let you know that this guy is weak to ice, and Blizzard does provide you with its openings, but not even that will stop him from spinning around all over the place, causing a ruckus during his DM. I used to think it was easier to dodge this while in the air, but it turns out it's easier to dodge this when you're grounded. Plus, being on the ground allows you to easily block his follow-up attack when he immediately goes into it. But yeah, really wasn't a fan of this one, so let's hope the next one can at least be a little better. Following that shit show, it's time to enter the clone zone with Larxene. Now at first she comes across as incredibly erratic with multiple fake outs, lightning attacks, and even spawning in an arseload of clones during a DM. Looking past all that however, it soon becomes apparent that this is another incredibly scripted fight, and her defense is on the lower side of things when compared to some of the other org members. Her openings are pretty straightforward, except for maybe her leap attack that can be parried, and this attack where she zips around for a bit before throwing lightning, which can be countered with a well-timed air step. I actually found my air steps whiffing here a little, which was pretty annoying, as well as the risk dodge whiffing, which would just sort of leave Sora standing there awkward, like, dude, what the fuck was that? My victory against Larxene was super sloppy, but considering the fact I'd actually put this run down for like 4 months and she was the first one I beat after picking it back up, I certainly wasn't going to start complaining. So let's see, who's next? Zigbar. This is another one that provided me with far more trouble than he should have, especially when you're just blocking back his bullets most of the time. He changes the arena layout and likes to rain down bullets, but these are trivial, even more so if you're using counter kick. What isn't trivial, however, is the DM that this guy throws out, and I honestly fucking despise this attack. This is the most frustrating DM to dodge out of the entire game, without question. It's just so claustrophobic and it's so easy to accidentally roll into the bullets. This eye patch wearing arsehat also has another trick up his sleeve. A trick reserved for him, Ansem, Xemnas and Xehanort, which will no doubt have you wanting to wax your eyebrows off with Gorilla Tape. Forever playing a perpetual game of the floor is lava, all these guys are somewhat airborne rather than having both feet grounded like the rest. Because of this, it means that they don't have to actually land back on the ground in order to start recovering from an attack, and because of this, they can and will break out of combos. I'll save my proper thoughts and frustrations on this for when I get to the main offender of this bullshit, but for now, just keep this little tidbit in mind. Okay, just one more combo and this guy should be gone. Oh, fuck off, I don't have time for this. Jesus, I'm not even at the halfway point yet. Well, whatever. Ansem isn't too bad as far as these data fights go. Don't get me wrong, he's challenging. I mean, he's a fucking super boss, so I'd expect as much. But he doesn't really have anything overly bullshit that will trip you up. The mines he spawns in were probably the main thing that gave me the most trouble, along with the lasers he can spawn in if you fail to get the punish from it, but that's about it. It also helps that this is another incredibly scripted fight. In fact, I don't think his pattern changes at all, so be sure to use this to your advantage. I had a couple guard fails during this fight, but I'm starting to think that those are just things I need to accept when doing these data fights. Regardless, that's Ansem done, so let's move on to who was personally my most frustrating fight out of the lot. Master Xehanort. Oh boy, do I have some shit to say about this one. It's worth noting that you don't even unlock both him and Shion until all the other data fights have been beaten, so it's safe to say he's a step above the rest in terms of difficulty.
Jeez, Bob. That would be downright logical.
This fight legitimately had me pissed off with some of the ways I was dying. I mean, just look at that face. That is a face that is fed the fuck up. Like how his meteors would lock me into the guard animation unless I was spamming the square button to try and dodge roll away. Or the fact that he's flying and therefore can break out of combos without hitting the ground, doubly so after Dark Form's ground finisher. What about how there are times he will disappear behind me, off screen and out of bounds no less, and start throwing those forsaken spiky balls at me. This right here, this honestly had me wanting to frisbee the fucking disc out the window. Every other humanoid boss is designed in a way so that they stay on screen, provided the camera isn't, facing a wall in the corner of the room. This allows these fights to remain incredibly flashy, fast, and most importantly, fair. But this is just a lock-on issue from the Naught Court leaking its way into a data fight. Yeah, the same lock-on issue I mentioned earlier that they swiftly patched out. Now this game does actually have attacks that end up behind you by design, but do you think this bullshit is one of those attacks?
Ah, yes, I've got an answer for that. No.
I haven't even mentioned his DM, and that's because, well, it honestly didn't give me much trouble. Wish I could say the same for the rest of the fight, because this is getting a bit much. Jesus, I feel like I'm breaking a brick wall down with my face, only to be met with a much larger, slightly sturdier brick wall. Nevertheless, I finally beat Xehanort and unlocked the final boss of this run. However, we still have half the data fights to go before we can begin to talk about Yozora, so let's just take on my pick for the hardest data battle Kingdom Hearts 3 ReMind has to offer, Xemnas. Don't get me wrong, this fight is actually one of my favourites, but fucking hell, I have had it with some of the bullshit that creeps through here. The way his kicks can end up behind you during his DM, and fake outs that don't quite fake out. Special mention to his final phase, which has the inquisitive idea of taking all the walls he tries to throw you into, and just spamming them all over the place like a fucking House of Mirrors carnival attraction. Get those plunge attacks and critical counters in where you can to skip the final phase entirely, or leave him with a bee's dig of health and get paddled around. Either way, moving on. So now there's Luxord or Luke Sword or Legissuit Larry or whatever the fuck you want to call this larrikin. Regardless of what you do decide to call him, this guy is basically just a shitty game of 50 to pick up with an atrocious auto lock on. Not much to say. This is uneventful and the DM lasts longer than the rest of the fight. From boring to pretty goddamn brilliant, Militia is a step above most of the other fights in terms of both design and just overall enjoyment. He has a rather small RV, and the fight is about as scripted as reality TV, but none of that gets in the way of this being one of the best data fights in the game. His Vortex attack doesn't break your guard here, which is a relief, and using counter impact will render those laser shooting flower petals a complete non-issue. Jesus Christ, I cannot believe that sentence just came out of my mouth. But yeah, overall, great fight, which is more than I can say for some of the other remaining data fights, starting with Terranaut. Terrible, tyrannical, tie my balls in a knot and batter them with knuckle dusters Terranaut. This guy drove me up the fucking wall to the point where I damn near oppressed my experiences with him. That being said, I have pretty vivid memories of his Oz attack just materializing next to me, lasers whiffing, and don't even get me started on the absolute clusterfuck that is this guy's DM. It's just the same shit from his gang fight while Vanitas is still alive. Yeah, the same shit I actually complained about in my original KH3 video because it was so fucking awful. Seriously, this is such a dick-headed attack, and if it wasn't for the fact that I somehow completely skipped his final DM, I would have much more to say. Besides, I need to save my breath for the utter hemorrhoid that is... fucking Vanitas! Oh my god, as I live and breathe, Vanitas is an absolute rubbish experience at level 1. And I wish I could just rip this cunt through my TV, strap him to a rocket, and fire him into the sun like a Looney Tunes cartoon. This guy, this fucking edgelord in a Hawaiian skirt provided me with more headaches than all the other data fights combined.
How is that okay? Vanitas?
Some of his attacks have virtually no telegraph and seem to appear out of thin air. The camera goes completely haywire whenever he flies around to throw ice projectiles at you, and Phase 2 can quite simply suck a fucking lemon.
Oh my gosh. That's illegal, you know? How could you do it?
Fake outs with these fireballs, these chains just appearing at a moment's notice. Honestly, the only saving grace here is that you can cancel out his DM with a well-timed thunder or air step. This for me was the worst data fight. It was also one of the first data fights I did, so in hindsight it's no wonder I got so sour on a few of the others. But nevertheless, it's time to end our journey through the Garden of Assemblage on a high note. Our final data fight is everyone's favourite best girl, Shion. Appropriately named as the fact, oh my god, Shion some dumb shit will frequently leave your mouth as this girl zips around at ridiculous speeds, leaving enough deadly blue lines in her wake to make a piece of grid paper blush. Now, as good as this fight is, there isn't a doubt in my mind that this fight is up there with Xemnas as one of the hardest fights in the game. It doesn't really have any bullshit moments like Xehanort, although I did suffer a few guard whiffs which understandably pissed in my pocket, but for the most part it's just raw difficulty stemming from a chaotic moveset. This fight is scripted, sure, but that doesn't make the onslaught of lasers, wombo combos, and armor phases any less harder to deal with. The lasers can be blocked, thankfully, because they lower your max HP, and keeping your back to the wall during this particular attack prevents her from just yeeting off to the side and hitting you from behind. But all that will only get you so far if you aren't making sure to land every critical counter you can. This is your damage from a counter slash, and this is your damage from a critical counter slash. The difference is night and day, and during the armored sections of a fight, if you aren't getting in every counter slash you can, then you can kiss any opening you hoped of getting goodbye. There is one thing that helps with this fight, helps with the rest of them as well actually, and that's a little something I like to call the rule of 3.
Right, it's the rule of 3. The rule of what?
The rule of 3 is something I use to identify openings or counters in the data fights. Whether it's counting out 3 guards before countering, or guarding 2 attacks before dodging the 3rd, you can almost wager a bet that most, if not all the data fights have at least one opening like this. Shion's laser beams, Dark Riku's floor trap, Ansem's charge, Syax's overhead slam, Larxine's walls of electricity, these all follow the rule of 3. So yeah, handy tip there for those of you who actually want to try this shit for yourself. But after what felt like an eternity, and with the help of yet another cheeky DM skip that I quite frankly have no idea how I pulled off, I managed to beat Shion and bring an end to my everlasting sleep paralysis that was the data fights of KH3 ReMind. However, I'm not totally out of the woods yet because after awakening in a strange and dark world, we are greeted by a not so mysterious figure who, now atop a skyscraper in Shibuya, challenges us to one final battle.
Time to end this.
Well, this is it. This is the ultimate challenge. The ultimate test of everything you've learned in terms of mechanics. The ultimate showcase of what Osaka team is capable of. Square Enix themselves came out and said that this boss will make you cry, and oh my Miss American Pie, did they manage to accomplish this and then some. Just look at these trophy percentages. Now admittedly only 8.7% even beat ReMind, but regardless, only half the people who beat that managed to beat one data fight. One. And only half the people who did that managed to beat all the data fights, with yet again only half the remaining people managing to beat Yozora and see the true ending. Also a reminder that this DLC isn't exactly the meatiest bit of content on offer, so it's not like people get burnt out after beating it. The jump in difficulty is just that large, so most people just say fuck this and go play something else. Now then, what actually makes Yozora so groin-grabbingly difficult? Well then. He can lower your max HP, steal your items, he can steal your fucking Keyblade, which honestly just had me putting the controller down and taking the L. He can begin the fight with his DM.
Are you done?
No, actually, motherfucker, I'm not done. Whenever he does begin the fight with his DM, it instantly forces him into phase 2 for the rest of the fight, and if he manages to steal your items while you're holding a Cooper coin, he will use the damn thing after he dies and be revived at half HP. He has attacks that end up behind you by design, and his defense is through the fucking roof, making him a bit of a damage sponge at level 1.
Sponge? Does this look like something a sponge would do?
Well, despite how insanely difficult this dude is, he's pretty fucking awesome. Attacks are clearly telegraphed, everything gets a showcase from your magic to air steps, there's finally a change in scenery which is nice, and there's not a whole lot to complain about. That being said, the one thing I don't like, it's probably the only thing I don't like actually, are the gigas that this guy decides to throw out around the midway point of his DM. Seriously, these things feel like such an afterthought and had me ripping my hair out with the way that they can just spike you into the ground from off screen. It wasn't until here where I noticed my Thundaga fly off into fucking La La Land that I finally figured out to turn off magic lock on, which made it much easier to deal with. But regardless, I'm still not a fan of these guys. However, after countless one-shots, numerous off-screen atrocities, and frankly far more hours than I care to admit, it finally happened. There it is. The run has at last reached its conclusion. Yozora fades away. We see a brief glimpse of Luxord being a chauffeur for Yozora, which is, you know, that was a thing. And at long last, Kingdom Hearts 3 ReMind Level 1 has reached its bittersweet end. You know, it's funny, this run took so long, longer than any challenge run has ever taken me. I wanted to throw in the towel so much, and judging by the sheer length of this video alone, it's obvious that I have a fair amount to say regarding this run. And yet now as I sit here long after beating it, so long that I've actually already gone and beaten other things for upcoming videos, I still find it difficult to find the words needed to describe beating this run. I've been playing a lot of Celeste lately, and after beating one of its chapters, I was greeted with this little bit of dialogue. Funny how we get attached to the struggle. The more I sit here reflecting on this run, the more this sentence sticks out in my mind. For every moment that felt cheap, for every victory I had snatched from my fingers just before I could get it, for every moment that just straight up had me like,
I'm done, because I don't care about this. I don't give a shit about this. I'm an adult man and I don't care about this game at all. Because this is a game for children. And I don't need this in my life, so.
I'll just sigh, put my head down, punch another Billy and continue to throw myself at this Disney-shaped brick wall. Maybe it was because I needed some way of keeping myself occupied during this shit show that was 2020. Maybe it was a sunk cost fallacy and I didn't want all the time I'd spent on this to be a complete waste. Ultimately, I think it's because we like to achieve goals. People like to accomplish things. And in spite of all the issues I had, these fights are actually rather well designed. It feels so good to actually block Xemnas' lasers rather than just spam a couple of QTEs. The Shion fight is absolutely spectacular, and Yozora is the uncontested best super boss in the entire series. There's just no doubt about it. Yes, there are issues, but at the end of the day, it's important to remember that these fights are balanced around abilities that literally prevent random one-shots or being wombo combo to death, for better or worse. I would also be remiss if I didn't mention patch 1.07 that launched just before the DLC did, introducing new abilities, keyblades, and much faster and smoother animations for attacks. This patch was a total game changer and catapults KH3's combat above KH2's in terms of quality, in my humble opinion. These fights have very little in the way of gimmicks as well, which is a stark contrast to some of the shit KH2's data bosses would pull. Can I recommend this run? Probably not, just because the amount of people who already beat these fights normally is already quite small, but please don't let that take away from the absolute quality of what's on offer here. At the end anyway. Like I said, the ReMind portion is incredibly bite-sized, and the fact that this shit cost me like 40 Australian dollars without the bonus orchestral shit I might add, really doesn't help its case. So what is it like to beat Kingdom Hearts 3 ReMind at level 1? Well, it was like jumping through an 800 meter hopscotch court just to go look at a topless pyramid. Or in other words, following a strict pattern for far too long for something that was ultimately fucking pointless.
Well, that was a big bust.
Thanks for watching as always. If you made it this far, it really does mean a lot. This run was super draining, so it's good to finally send it off for good. Like I mentioned earlier, I actually managed to record a full playthrough for another video, a non-challenge run video this time. You can probably already guess what it is, but yeah, keep an eye out for that. All likes, comments, subs, and all that jazz, greatly appreciated. And until next time, have a good one and take it easy.